Okay, cool. All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Anand Krishna. I'm co-founder and CEO of Inkle. I'm based in Bangalore and San Francisco, and we're a team of 30 plus folks in the founding team here. 2 years old. We serve almost 400 US companies with software for automating tax and accounting. So that's us. I'm a YC Alum from 2 companies ago. That is a company called Lotus Pay, which was summer 17 YC. And I'm happy to share my experiences from that. And also just in general, if anyone has questions here, please feel free to pose any kind of questions around the whole application process, preparation process, but not the interview process, because I think the interview process is a whole different ballgame. Let's talk more about preparation, applying, form, recommendations, all those things. Yeah. I've given this talk a couple of times, so maybe some of you have attended before, but at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to go through this similar kind of set of advice and documents as well. First, though, let me just share my profile and welcome all of you to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn here. I just posted it on the Gmeet chat here.
Yes.
And then I'm going to also send a couple of other links. Share this one. This was something which Cheryl, engaged me with for a previous similar seminar we did earlier this year. And then let's make sure it's the right one. 1 second. Yeah, so this was a kind of a summary, a really nice summary that they did, that Razorpay did. And then I'm going to go through some of this documentation here, so some of this notes here on this document, which I constructed during the last seminar, but I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to literally just go through this stuff. Okay, so let's start. I presume that most of you are in the final stages of applying, considering to apply, or have already possibly even applied already. But what I'm going to do is give you advice around the application. Cheryl, is that about right? Just for focusing entirely on how to craft a great application.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, cool. So where I'll start with is focusing on the key parts of the application form and where I think people go wrong and where I think people can do better, etc. Right? Okay, let me start with some advice over here, which let's do this. So go piece by piece, right? So crafting a great application form, right? I think crafting a winning application comes frankly, from the most important part of it, which is crafting that great application form in and of itself. Right? The key factors I normally mention here is that brevity is key. Right? Imagine these YC partners are reading 30,000 application forms and have roughly 300 seats available. So less than 1% are getting in, right? And so they're going to interview maybe about a couple of thousand, I would guess at most, right? Something like, or less than 10%, maybe 5% are getting an interview, right? And so when they've got 28,000 application forms to filter and weed out, they're going to find reasons to weed out application forms, right? That's kind of just the default position. But that is not necessarily their default position. They do actually take a very nice view on the things. But it's just human sentiment, right? That people will always try to see how they can make life themselves easy for when there's selection bias involved and things like that, right? In terms of how the YC partners see, this is one of the great things about YC is that they've open sourced everything. When Paul Graham started YC, he was very clear, right? He'd remove as many hurdles as possible to the path to building a great company and building, that kind of whole journey. And one of the big hurdles was, hey, you need a warm intro to capital. YC got rid of that by saying, hey, no, you don't need that at all. All you need, frankly, is an application form and a video and a demo. Right? And there's absolutely no benefit of getting a warm intro because, frankly, they don't listen to warm intros anyway. Right? So it was a really interesting paradigm. Like you can be sitting over here in Bangalore or anywhere in India, craft a great application form, and you're in without any context, any connection, any warm intro. Right? That's the great thing about it. So I think their default position is they want people to win. Right? However, they will also find people reasons to weed you out, right? Because they have just the sheer volume. Right? And often they say there's nothing quite wrong with your application form. It's just that there was too many great application forms. I find that is probably correct, but I also find that there's going to be reasons why they weed people out. For example, spelling mistakes are totally unacceptable. For God's sake, use Grammarly, it's free. Prose, right? Prose means long form text. Don't use bullet points, right? Why is brevity key and at the same time prose is important? Really what I would say about this is what they're looking for is brevity in a concise manner to communicate what you're trying to say, but they're not looking for it in just like 5-word bullet points. That's just rude, right? That's just like lazy, right? So what they really want you to do is just keep it concise to the actual question that's being answered. And very often they find that despite all of the training, despite all of the webinars, despite all of our advice from alumni, people still don't answer the exact question that's being asked, which is the simplest thing to do, right? Okay, so prose, don't go over like 5 to 10 lines per answer. Or we often find people writing, a whole page on each answer. It's pointless. They're not going to read it. They won't have time, and it's not going to actually help you. In fact, it's probably going to be detrimental to your form. So keep it concise, keep it prose, keep it long form text, and spell check and grammar check. Pay attention. This is what I was saying earlier. Paying attention to the operative word. The operative word can be, for example, who is your competition? Right? The operative word there is who. Right? The question is not how are you better. The question is who. Right? So very often they find that people start writing like why they're better than the competition. That's exactly the kind of thing that irritates the hell out of them, especially in the interviews actually, but more so right now, let's focus on the forms. So please pay great attention to the operative word. It's the easiest thing to get wrong. So super, super important. No decks allowed, right? YC doesn't accept decks. Just, another one of those kind of giant hurdles that they've got rid of. Of course, they put the application form in, but there's a reason to that. It's been a historical thing and it's working well. Decks are not required. No production quality, no image quality, no, on the videos. They just don't really care about all that stuff. What they care about is a clear communication of your ideas, right? I often say, sprinkle your form full of metrics, stories, examples, quotes, and snippets, right? What does this mean? Don't just give long form, boring generalization answers. If you're able to sprinkle snippets throughout the form, this is a key skill that you will learn, especially for the interview as well. But what to speak of the form in of itself? The form, if you can add these, right, especially metrics, they love metrics. Metrics, data speaks louder than any kind of claim, right? And examples, and of course quotes from customers. You could easily make a claim such as, hey, this product this TAM is big. That's a claim. There's just zero context to it, zero data, nothing to back it up, etc. But you could also put in, McKinsey says this is a $2 billion market. Right? That's a verifiable statistic, right? From a quote. And then you can also say, well, actually, we've done a survey, right? And that's a first-hand data process. And then finally, you could say, okay, we have real metrics from our users. Right? So the more precise you can get with this, the better. Okay, the first reason that they will reject, even if you're a great team, is that the TAM is just simply too small. Right? And I have seen it time and time again, and I warn everyone about this, and still we get it wrong and wrong again and again. The TAM is too small. If the TAM is too small, it's an instant reject, almost an instant reject, regardless of the rest of the benefits of the team. So please, please, please make great notice of this. You must have a clear path to $100 million run rate. You must have a clear path to $1 billion outcome. Right? And for that, they want to see that this is not a service opportunity. This is a product. And so it's not like a dev shop. They don't fund service-based companies. There must be a technology company or a hardware company or a biotech company or a D2C company. They do not fund service companies or dev shops. Right? And the TAM must be a clear path to $100 million run rate. What does that mean? That means that you must have a reasonable way to get to that. They don't want necessarily for you to say, okay, this is a $200 billion market and we're going to capture 0.01% of it. Frankly speaking, that's a broad claim because the $200 billion doesn't even, isn't really all related to you. And more importantly, they would rather have the category winner, and in every market there's generally three or four category winners, right? So what they really want is for you to identify, ideally, a small niche, what we call, wedge or beachhead, right? Where you establish like a small kind of entry point, pinhole entry point to the market, and you come out like a shotgun at the other end when you really get a core group of audience that loves your product. Right? So if you can establish that in the application form, that you've identified that core niche audience, it's a conundrum, right? It's a core niche audience, but it's a big variable, a big ultimate TAM. These are not contradictions of each other. It's a really important point. They want you to have a tight entry point, but they want you to have a very large TAM as well. And you can actually verbalize that in just a sentence or two. Right? So these are not contradictions, but you must identify the larger TAM whilst you're doing that. Okay, the team video. I'm going to try and speed up a bit now. Team video, sit together if possible. If you're in different cities, don't worry, Zoom together. Low production quality, no fancy effects, no sounds, no lights, nothing like that. Just, obviously light yourself up. Just the key is ideally good audio. You'd be amazed how bad the audio quality is in most of these videos. MacBook Pro is the best. MacBook Air is also good. Don't use any AirPods that just somehow skews the audio too much. Keep yourself super well lit. Speak slowly. Right? They struggle to understand Indian accents. Bear that in mind. Most of these are Westerners who have never been to India. Don't use Indian jargon like lakhs, crores, rupees. Show enthusiasm and passion. Be a little bit more energetic than normal, not animated, but certainly a bit more energetic. And do not read off the screen, right? If you read off the screen, it's very visible because your eyes are moving across the screen, and they hate that. They want a natural conversation. They just want to get to know you. Keep the bullet points in your head and keep it to 60 seconds. This is a super important thing, but many of these team videos go well over 60 seconds, never go over this, right? They're very clear on that point. Demo video, this can be anything, typically a slide deck or typically a tour of the software. Sometimes you can use a deck, right? Ideally, you would not use a deck. Sometimes you can use Figmas, prototypes, and so on. Ideally, again, not. Ideally, you've written some code, a few lines of code is also fine, and you run execute, and it does something like send an SMS, even something as simple as that. If it's biotech or hardware, obviously you can't do that. Show something else. A deck is also okay for folks like that. This can be more than 2 minutes, 1-2 minutes, but no longer than 2 or 3 minutes. Number 5, in fact, this should be number 1. I can't emphasize this enough. YC is super overweight on technical co-founders, right? So if you don't have a technical co-founder, you will almost always get rejected. Right? Now, so this question comes up a lot: is what if I don't have a technical co-founder? Should I apply? Yes, you should apply. Try your best to get a technical co-founder in the process of applying, or startup school, or co-founder matching tool, or in your network. Should you apply? Yes, do apply. Keep applying. I always recommend everyone to apply regardless. People say, well, it's a waste of time. No, it's not necessarily a waste of time. 10% of YC companies are solo founder, and I would say about a third to a half of those are solo non-tech, right? So the chances are completely stacked against you. Like less than 3 to 5% of YC companies are solo non-tech founders. And some of them may be non-tech double founders, or two founders. That could be a slightly higher percentage, of course. But generally, you can already see the chances of you getting into YC is less than 1%. Why stack the odds even more by not having a technical co-founder, right? So again, this comes back to factors, right? All of these things are factors. If you can, one by one, remove these hurdles or add impetus or add weight to your application form, you're just increasing your percentage from being that one, that out in that 99% or not in the 1% to maybe 10% or maybe even a 20% chance of getting selected, right? No one thing here gets you over the line, right? It just increases your odds, right? And this is probably the thing that will increase your odds by far more than anything else, is having a technical co-founder who can single-handedly code the product, ideally full stack. If not full stack, then it's certainly able to code most of the product herself or himself. And that's important because YC strongly advocates against outsourcing to dev shops or contractors. And they just really, emphasize that point, and I can see why, because frankly, you will never get the right kind of buy-in when you outsource to dev shops or contractors for the product journey, the iteration, the speed that you need, right? Team equity, generally they require a fair split. They don't stipulate that, but it's understood. If it's hugely uneven, like 90-10, it's just a bit pointless because they're just going to see it and think it's a red flag. They think it's a 10-year journey and someone who had an idea, there's no value in an idea. It's all about execution, right? That's their clear position on this. No co-CEOs, clearly define your roles, CEO, CTO, COO. And yeah, for God's sake, do startup school. They love their own product. Startup school is awesome. I did it. In fact, I did startup school after I did YC Core, and I loved it. I actually thought some of it was better than YC Core. It's a great online MOOC, massive online open course. And yeah, it's a really good product. It has a co-founder matching tool. But the videos are amazing. Like really all of the content that you get, you just keep playing it back to yourself. Having it there is just an awesome experience. 43% of a recent batch came through startup school, so they love this product if you come through startup school. Alumni recommendations, get to know people first. Don't just suddenly 24 hours beforehand ask and expect alums to recommend you. Get 2 to 5, not more than that. You don't need 200 of them. You don't need 20 of them. You don't even need 10. Ideally, they know you and they know something about your product. You don't have to go for famous ones like the Razorpay founder just because he's the Razorpay founder. You need to go for someone who knows you and who can talk a little bit about you. Again, it's not a decisive factor. It's one of the extra factors that will help your application along. Traction, I personally think they do accept product ideas, right? They do accept zero, progress. Ideally, though, you would have done something. Right? You would have got a paid pilot. You've coded a few lines. You would have got 5-10 customers. You would have, kind of shown that your, a product works, something like that. Right? Not just a PowerPoint. Right? Ideally, something, a wait list, even a survey, even and a contract. So if it's B2C, maybe you put up a page and you've got a wait list. If it's B2B, maybe you've got a couple of LOIs. Right? They're even unpaid LOIs are still fine. Right? But if you've done absolutely nothing, then most likely you'll be in one of those 10 to 20,000 companies that they'll just instantly reject because they're like, this team has actually not done anything. Right? And they just woke up 2 days before the deadline and thought, hey, why don't we apply? It's not to say that every single company that applies has any traction. Right? Most of them, have very little traction. Revenue is not required at all, so don't worry about that. Ideally, though, you have something that works that you can show to a customer. That's what they want to see. Right? Speaking to customers, it definitely shows, you've got to incessantly speak to customers. Right? And this is the most important question in the application form. If you can show this and you can really define that you've spoken to customers and the customers have given the answer to this question. Right? This question doesn't come from the answer to this question doesn't come from you. It comes from customers. Right? So the customer might say to you that something, and you're like, "Wow, I would never have thought of that." Right? That's the answer that they want in this, and this is the one that many times the YC partners fast forward to when they read the application form, and they're most impressed when it could answer. Or what I would say is a light bulb moment comes from this specific question. Right? A light bulb moment is they're like, oh my God, I would never have thought of that myself as a reader. That's a really interesting fact, right? And that's almost guaranteed to get you into an interview, right? Ideally, of course, with a stronger application form otherwise. Keep reapplying, use the same Hack and Use account. Don't try to hack it by using different Hack and Use accounts. You can keep the same, you can change your email ID, of course, but keep the same Hack and Use account. And show iteration, show learnings, show what you've done. Even adding, removing co-founders is fine, but ideally show some progress between applications, right? So if you get rejected, don't worry. Most people get it on the second or third attempt that do get on the second or third attempt. I have a friend in Chennai who got it on the 11th attempt, so they love the grit and determination of keep on trying, right? And finally, keep applying. finally apply well in advance, right? Don't wait for the last second. And it's already, I think, for the fall batch coming to the deadline now. Try to ideally apply a little bit in advance because they see the application forms in turn. If you leave it to the last few days, the server could crash, whatever it is, just don't leave it to the last moment. And of course, if you apply late, most likely your application form will sit at the end of the line. As I said, the odds are already stacked against you, and they won't read your application form until they've processed everything else and given away most of the seats. And by the time they've given away most of the seats, there's only about 20 seats left for the late applicants, right? So bear that in mind. Okay, cool. I'm going to stop there and take questions.
Folks, you can start posting your questions in chat. Meanwhile, Nikish has raised his hand. Nikish, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yep. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hey, Anand. Nice to meet you. And my question is more on a specific question in the application process. So there's a question asking if you have any other ideas you consider applying it, please list them. One may be something we've been waiting for. Often we fund people to do something that they list here. So how do I go about answering this question? So is it something, is it like a trick question they're trying to ask, or is it something I have to be very honest with?
Yeah, sure. By the way, in the Gmeet chat, I've just posted those 2 documents, right? So feel free to go through those. Look, I think, sometimes they just love the team, right? And they want to find an excuse to accept the team, right? But they think your idea is pathetic, right? And they just know it's going to fail, or they have a hunch it's going to fail. If that's the case, then it's not a trick question. They genuinely want to know, do you have another idea? And it's perfectly fine and good to have another idea, and you must answer the question ideally. Don't try to just leave it blank. It's not a trick question. Do answer it. Do put another idea, put a nice, interesting other idea that you thought about. It can't just be an iteration of your first idea. Something completely unrelated, ideally. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
2 questions on the Gmeet chat. Rohit Roy says, can CTO and CEO be same? Yes, of course. It's a solo tech founder, perfectly fine. As I said, 1 in 10 YC companies are solo founders. Generally, they tend to be technical. If the CEO is a technical one, and therefore what does the other founder do? Well, if there's if there's a technical CEO, that's fine. Then if there's another founder who's technical, they would be presumably the CTO. But if there's a non-technical founder, in addition to a technical CEO, then obviously the non-technical founder would be a COO or something like that, CPO, that kind of thing. That's okay. But as long as one of the founders is able to code, it's ideal. The fact that the technical one wants to be the CEO, presumably because she or he is, the first person in or something like that, I'm not sure. Maybe they're more suited to it. That's kind of still acceptable, so that's okay. Rohit.
If you see a focus on AI-related companies, or is YC still interested in D2C e-commerce startups?
Yeah, there was a D2C wave a few years back. They love those things. I still think it's there. I just think it's slightly less of the flavor of the month, but still for sure, do apply. They fund lots of D2C companies, so do apply. It's absolutely not all AI companies, right? That's completely wrong with whoever kind of spreads those kind of rumors. It's not all AI companies. It is, they've put out, and there's a nice video from, I think they call it Lighthouse or something like that. It's a new podcast by YC where the 4 partners sit together in a room. And in one of those first podcasts, they just a few months back, they said, they didn't one day wake up and say, hey, we want to fund YC companies. They want to fund great founders, and they said, well, what are the great founders doing? And they found that the great founders were all pursuing AI. Litecoin is probably access, so Litecoin podcast. So I think that's the way to see this, right? What are great founders doing? And a lot of great founders are using AI to innovate, to disrupt. And so that's why they became more accepting of AI companies. But that doesn't mean that suddenly it's only AI companies. They're just genuinely still interested in what great founders are doing across the board. Okay, so let me try to scroll up. You might have to help me a little, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I missed some of these questions.
Pick up a couple questions from the chat, and then we can have. There's quite a few people in queue as well, so we can take them up as well.
Okay, so Mohit Nagari says that what if a co-founder is left? That's okay. As I said, adding co-founders, removing co-founders. You can do that post facto, submitting the application form. In fact, even after the deadline, there's a way to edit your application form. If you're talking about before you apply, then obviously you don't need to mention that. But in a previous application from last batch, you may have already mentioned that. That's okay. The software tracks this, and it's absolutely no problem. It's quite common actually in the pre-seed companies for these kind of things to happen. So that's fine. Yeah. Roland says, what would be an equity fair split? Do you see traction and production? So traction and product validation is the same thing. So Roland, the first question, equity fair split. Honestly, at pre-seed level, it should be, and Michael Seibel says this, right? It should be a fair split between founders. That's what he expects, an equal split, because it's a long journey ahead, and there's no value to an idea, right? Ideas are meaningless. It's all about execution, and it's a 10-year journey ahead. Right? So I think the fair split that they expect is an equal split between 2 or 3 founders, right? However, if the company for some reason had funding, progress, traction, 6-figure revenue run rate, and then another founder came in, then obviously it may not be quite an equal split, and that's something that you just have to justify. But if it gets to the level where it's like unmanageable, and the other co-founder is dilution, equity after dilution just reduces so much that they lose skin in the game, they lose interest, then obviously that's going to be damaging to the health and the future of the startup, and that's what they're worried about, right? So they really need you to have enough skin in the game that after 5 rounds of dilution, you still have something to hold on to, right? Do you see traction and product validation is the same thing? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but product validation comes from users, that's all. People using your product? Are they paying for your product? Do they see value in your product? If it's B2B, if it's B2C, are they using it religiously? Are they telling others about it? So I think, yes, traction and product validation generally for me are the same thing. Validation does not come from investors. And validation definitely doesn't come from investors or even from your own team. Validation comes from people seeing the value in the product, either by telling others about it or paying for it. Okay, let's take some online questions.
All right. Adnan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Anand. So I am IT and currently working on unstructured data analysis for BFSI companies, and we also like a pre-seed fund from Entrepreneur First. So my question, and we have made good progress, got B2B LOIs and on way to get contracts as well from good banks. So we have not made the product. So do you suggest us to apply in this or wait for a few months, because we have made good products? Such, what would be your say?
Okay, Adnan, I couldn't hear all of that, but I think what you're saying is you got into Entrepreneur First and you don't have a full product yet. So, I kind of smile to myself when people ask this question, should I apply? The answer to that is, it's always yes, right? Pretty much always yes, right? There is no good reason to not apply, right? And if you think you're too early, that's bullshit, right? No one's ever too early for YC. If you think that you may change or iterate your idea, that's definitely not a reason to not apply, right? If you think you're going to add or remove a co-founder, again, just apply, all of this is academic. Just apply, and if you get an interview and you get in, you can worry about a lot of these things later, right? So I think just the default position is apply. It's 2 hours of your life maybe, and it's well worth it. And frankly, there's if you do a half decent job of the application, there's a good chance that you'll get an interview. And so really, the default position is apply. If you have to convince yourself not to apply, it has to be for an incredibly good reason. For example, you can't go to the batch because you're getting married, and therefore, you can't possibly go to the batch, right? That's a great reason to not apply. Or you can't put in your your papers and at your current employer, and you can't leave because you have a vesting date in 3 months. That's a great reason to not apply, because anyway, if you get accepted, you can't attend the batch, and they're anyway going to reject that point. But there's really no other reason that I can think of to not apply, if that makes sense. I don't know if I answered your question, Adnan.
Yeah, thanks, Arun.
All right, Gausham, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I do come from film industry. I'm a film producer. We working on to solve a very, very specific niche problem of the international film production market. Now, when we meet some of the VCs and in general public, they don't understand, they don't relate with the problem very well. Most of the company I see in YC, they fund the D2C company because with the consumer, everybody can relate. And what we are solving is solving the problem of the film producers. So now, I mean, and I'm also like 35 now. So, I mean, I also seen the YC fund the pretty like young college students, I mean, who just recently graduate. So how do you see my company chance to be accepted in YC? I mean,
so again, it goes back to my previous question, my previous answer, which is just apply, right? This is an academic question again, though, because what's the harm in applying? Right? It's again 2 hours of your life. To answer your question in a slightly different way, it is not true that most YC companies are B2C. That's completely untrue, right? In fact, I would probably think most of them are B2B. And in fact, only a small minority are D2C, right? So I'm not sure where you got that from. That's completely untrue. In fact, I would say actually tech or software for stodgy old industries that need to be disrupted, such as the film industry, presumably doesn't use as much software as it could, is an amazing possibility, and it is a vast market. So I can't see a good reason for you to not apply at all. I think it's an interesting opportunity. In terms of age, I don't have a great answer to this. They don't discriminate on age. There's a very clear position. They don't discriminate on anything, right? Frankly, they're quite fair. But it just seems as though, for me, from my perspective, the vast majority of applicants are young, right? In fact, there's another way of looking at it. It's like, let's look at this. Why is it that the vast majority of the batch is men, right? And they try to avoid as much as they can on women founders. But it's a reality that the vast majority of applicants are men. Right? And so they've tried their best. They do lots of, in fact, they haven't tried their best. They can do much more always. They've tried their best to encourage minority founders to apply. In the same way, I would say the younger application form population is reflective in the batch of who's applying, right? So again, I wouldn't see it as a reason for you to not apply, right? I would just see it as a statistical thing that, yes, you are possibly, and by the way, it's actually the average age of a YC founder is older than you think. It's definitely not early 20s. It's more like late 20s or even at the 30. So I don't see a great reason for you to not apply.
well, thank you.
Hey, Sangram, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Anand. Thanks a lot for a very insightful session. This is Sangram Kakad. I'm founder of Advice Bazaar, which is a marketplace for instant expert advice. So there are two things that I wanted to highlight. So I'm a solo non-tech founder, and we have launched the product a couple months back. We do have sales, but we don't have as impressive of other, successful YC candidates that we see every year. When the list comes out, we see that these are the startups and they already have millions of dollars of revenue. We have sales, but we don't really have very impressive sales to impress YC team, I believe. And the second thing is, this is a bootstrap startup. So I have a full-time job, and I fund my startup from my salary and my savings. But the team that I've hired is working full-time. So could this be a disadvantage to me, solo non-tech founder? Again, they say they fund startups at idea stage, but not sure if that's really true. So low sales, that's the second point. And the third point is, I have a full-time job and I fund it out of my salary.
Take the sales bit first, Sangram. I got your point. It is completely untrue to say most YC companies upon application have millions of revenue. That's complete nonsense. Again, it's a false rumor. I don't know who told you that. In fact, the last batch, I can tell you from my data points, and by the way, I'm bookkeeper to hundreds of YC companies from recent batches. So I can tell you that that's just simply not true. The average revenue that I saw of the last batch was actually an ARR of less than 6 figures upon graduation day. Right? So, that's 3 months into the batch, right? Get funded and so on. So it is not true to think that they all have millions of revenue. In fact, most of them the vast majority of them have zero revenue upon entry, as far as I can see. So please don't assume that revenue is a challenge at all. In fact, it's good that you have some revenue. It's also, funnily enough, in some ways, a small weakness. I laugh about it with venture capital funds that when they see a small amount of revenue, they start examining this small amount of revenue as if it's meaningful. It's completely not meaningful, given that it's just such a small sample set. But anyway, that's how a lot of VCs behave. But I think YC takes a more pragmatic view on revenue. Some revenue is good. It's an idea that you've got off your seat and done something, and it's great that people are paying, right? But don't assume that your revenue is a challenge. Any revenue is great, and in fact, you probably be in the top, kind of 10% of companies in a batch if you have more than a 6-figure revenue, right? This thing about solo non-tech founder, as I said before, you can't help it. If you have no co-founder, sure, that's fine. Go ahead and apply. But it's just the odds are totally stacked against you. Just bear that in mind. Yeah, they don't fund more than in a batch of 300, probably 30 are solo founders, and probably of those 30, about 10 are solo non-tech founders. Right? So you've now got 30,000 applicants, and only 10 of them are in your position, Sangram. So just think about the numbers. Yeah? If you want to increase your chances, get a tech co-founder. Right? That's all I can say to you. There is no other magic that I can tell you right now. Right? In terms of your last point about being in a job, yeah. In fact, it's funny how many people are in a job when they're applying to YC. It's actually quite a lot, right? It's okay to be in a job. Ideally, you would be resigning or resigned or committed to resigning. A lot of people apply to YC and say, I'm only going to resign if I get into YC. I just think that's the wrong way to think about startups in general and life in general. But that's your choice. But I just think if you have a great idea and you're committed to it, just go for it, right? Take the risk. That said, that's easier for me to say than most. I understand why people need to pay the bills and have commitments, have family, have whatever it is, right? Have dependents. I can totally understand why someone cannot take that leap of faith and move out and take that incredible risk. I just think that the amount of energy, time, and attention that a startup needs requires you to be full-time on it, and the more success that you can put into that the more chance of success it will yield, right? So I think YC sees that. I don't think they mind too much that people are still in a job. What they do ask is that you're committed to leaving your job. I think that they also expect you to ideally have, the majority of them would have already left the job, tried some progress, got some customers, written some code. If you can manage all of that in their spare time, then sure, just keep applying. Sure.
Okay, thanks a lot, Anand.
Sure.
Thanks, Sangram. Vinay, if you're here.
Yeah.
Let's keep it to one question and one short one, if that's okay. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Anand, for the insightful session. We have a unique situation. So we are 4 founders, 3 from IIT Bombay, 2 from IIM Bangalore. And within us, we are building something into neurotech space. And within us, we have some 30 plus patents. So we feel that technically we have all the capabilities. We have perfected the product in last 2.5 years, or perfected the technology. We have cracked the technology in last 2.5 years while we are doing something else. Now we need funding to take it to the next level or actually productize it. So my question is, does YC consider founders in the consumer hardware or deep tech space as well?
I mean, absolutely yes.
And should there be a different playbook for us? Because our time to market is at least 12 months after some funding comes.
Yeah, it's perfectly normal for hardware startups to take years to get to market. I would say a huge number of YC, out of 4,000 YC companies, it's a public list, you can search yourself. There's probably hundreds that are hardware, and all of them took years to get to market. So it's absolutely no problem. They love hardware. And again, they're probably even overweight on hardware if you think about it. I would imagine that probably less than 5% of companies that apply are hardware, but probably more than that percentage in the batch are actually hardware. So they're probably actually overweighting on hardware if you think about it.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Kritat mentioned that he had a question.
Yeah, hey, hi Sheryl, thank you. Hello Anand, thank you for, I actually was so consumed in your responses, I lost my own chain of thoughts. But I have just two quick questions. I think one of them somebody else also asked, so I'll just go with that once first. So for